I'm going to be incredibly honest with you and tell you that when I went to go and see this concert at Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which for context was the day after we landed from Manhattan, having not slept overnight on the flight, I was not planning to end up sitting here making a full-length video review about it. I was thinking I'll do a nice little Instagram post, perhaps a TikTok. However, what I wasn't anticipating was that this particular concert version of Pippin at Theatre Royal Drury Lane would be fantastic. Meaning against my damn wishes, I had to buy the merchandise and then I had to come here and tell you about it. So begrudgingly, this is why I loved Pippin. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. If you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Mickey Joe. I am obsessed with all things theatre and I am a professional theatre critic here on social media. I create full-length review videos on YouTube. You can also find me on other social media platforms, and I recently went to go and see Pippin in concert at Theatre Royal Drury Lane, starring Alex Newell, starring Jack Yarrow, Zizi Strallon, Patricia Hodge, an exceptional cast who we're going to talk about in more detail later on. For those of you who did see this, I'm going to be recounting some of the most memorable moments of the evening. For those of you who didn't, I'm going to talk about why I enjoyed this so much and what it was like in terms of a concert staging, because they can vary wildly, both in terms of how staged they are and quality. And for those of you who are not at all familiar with this musical, with Pippin, I'm going to let you know a little bit more about that as well, and why I think it is hugely underrated. Not just the score, which I was pleasantly reminded of the strength of when I got to go and see this concert, but the entire damn thing. Justice for Pippin, musical theatre gods, who apparently live in the flat upstairs. Anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. If any of you were also at Pippin in concert, let me know all of your thoughts and feelings in the comments section down below. Very intrigued to hear what other people thought. If anyone else has seen Pippin in a previous production before, that's going to give way to some fascinating conversations, because many different iterations of this show, and I'll explain why, have looked very different. I first saw it at the Menier Chocolate Factory. I then saw it as we were coming out of lockdown in a socially distanced production in the garden of a queer pub in London. To my regret, I did not get to see the Tony Award-winning 2013 Broadway revival starring Patina Miller. I also obviously didn't get to see any of the original productions, either on Broadway or in the West End, because I'm young. I got asked for ID to buy a bottle of wine yesterday. I feel fantastic. This eye cream is doing its work. Anyway, share all of your Pippin-related thoughts in the comments down below. In the meantime, I'm going to let you know what I thought about the concert version. So let's start off with trying to explain the plot of Pippin. I'm laughing because it's a little bit of an abstract show. It is not, however, as wacky as a lot of people make it out to be. It has a coherent plot and it makes sense to me on multiple levels. And I see a lot of people talking about like, oh, this is such a crazy show. And it's not really. The plot makes sense to me. It is very meta-theatrical and it has been interpreted several different ways. Bob Fosse was a key creative collaborator on the original production with Stephen Schwartz, who, if you don't know, wrote the score. Stephen Schwartz, who you know from Wicked, as well as from Godspell, as well as from The Prince of Egypt. Not forgetting the book writer Roger O'Herson, but Fosse was the original director at a point in his career when he was a strong creative force, and you can feel that enduringly in the material, even though when this show gets revived, it ends up looking and being quite different. And I feel like that's because people feel as though they need to foist a concept onto it in order for it to make sense. The central conceit of the thing is that we are greeted by a troupe of players, led by the leading player. They introduce the show by announcing to us, the audience, who they can perceive, that they have magic to do, and they then pull a member of the audience who is going to be playing the role of Pippin for their impromptu performance. That's what they say anyway. In reality, it's the actor who's rehearsed the role of Pippin. It's kind of the world's most obvious plot situation, but it's also from the Rachel Berry walking down the aisle singing Don't Rain on My Parade at the end of season 1 of Glee, School of Charming. Anyway, they go on to tell us that Pippin is an actual medieval character, the son of the King Charlemagne, about whom there is much speculation and not much is known, which gives way to them crafting a plot around what his life might have looked like. And it begins with his coming of age and his graduating university and deciding that he wants to make something of himself, that he wants to find his own corner of the sky. All of the musical theatre tenors just got triggered because we've all sung that song. Rivers do indeed belong where they can ramble. I've been there, I feel you. Not for nothing, I did also play Pippin in a production of Pippin. Shout out to your University of Surrey Musical Theatre Society, never forget. Anyway, looking for fulfillment and reward, Pippin goes through the motions iterations of these various different pursuits. He initially tries to fight in a war alongside his father's army so that he can feel closer to him as a patriarchal figure. When that doesn't work, he heads out into the country and turns to his rebellious grandmother, who just suggests that he ought to be getting laid more. He tries his hand at political rebellion. He tries to be the ruler that his father couldn't be. When all that fails, he inadvertently ends up in this domestic living situation and comes to enjoy himself, but is startled to discover how long he has been there without feeling completely and perfectly fulfilled. By which point in the show we start to perceive the hands of the leading player pulling on one or two puppet strings, and it materializes that Pippin is not necessarily as in control of his own choices and his own destiny as he thought. Now, to my mind, the entire show has a deeper metaphorical meaning, and it's actually an allegory for suicide. Stay with me. Or if you don't want to know about this or consider this to be a spoiler, skip past me. But honestly, I feel like this will help people who have never really understood this show to understand it better. So the show is set to end with this final performance or act that has been teased by the players from the beginning and at multiple points throughout the show. They are all very much looking forward to it, and when Pippin is in utter despair and he's tried everything and nothing has worked, they agree with him, but they remind him there is still this final act to be performed, and whatever version of this is and whatever version of the show, he's basically going to kill himself in a way that is glorious and show-stopping. Whether he sets himself on fire, whether he jumps from a great height into a burning pit, whatever. But I think what this is a theatricalization of an allegory about suicide. You know, he begins with optimism and hope about the life he is going to lead and the world he is going to conquer, and it's full of possibility. There's an enormity of choice and he just doesn't know what to do, but he is sure that there is going to be something. He is confident. He will find his corner of the sky, that's why he's belting about it. The players, meanwhile, and in particular the leading player, I think represent the voices in his head that steer him towards these things, but also, in a slightly nefarious way, steer him towards some darker choices later on. And the various pursuits that he has within the show sort of represent the average life cycle. You know, he begins by trying to imitate his parents and trying to earn his father's approval. Then we see this sort of lustful adolescence, and then a rebellious phase where he turns against his parents politically and thinks that he has become wiser than them. He then ends up in a relationship that is not this fantasy version. She is a little bit older than he is. She has a child, and it's full of compromise, and it's full of chores and daily routine and monotony and work to be done. But the comfort that he finds in that is rewarding enough until he realizes how long it's been, and he is confronted by the realization that, oh my god, it's been a year and I've forgotten all these things I wanted to do in my life when I was a younger man. And it's at that point that he is so filled with despair that the thoughts in his head tell him that he ought to just kill himself instead. So this is what I'm saying. The whole thing is an allegory happening inside of Pippin's mind. Now, the original show used various theatrical devices in order to perpetrate this. There was elements of mime, and some of the music is inspired by minstrel songs. It was quite of its time. There were little nods to medieval pageantry as well. Subsequently, the show has undergone many reinventions by different creatives trying to, you know, get to that same meaning of the piece using a different concept. So the first version of the show I ever saw was Video Game Pippin. The material is all the same, but visually we were set in this sort of a digital realm, and when he is going through all of these different pursuits, he engages with them like levels in a video game, and so the thing they want him to do at the end becomes the final level. That was the Menier Chocolate Factory version. The version that I saw socially distanced outdoors was Hippie Pippin, with a smaller group who multi-rolled, playing different characters, but it was very much aesthetically set during the Flower Power era. Of course, the Broadway revival in 2013 was Circus Pippin, which works pretty damn neatly with the themes of the show. So having told you I think as much as I can about the show, what exactly did this version decide to be? Well, the first thing that I loved about this is that it didn't feel tethered to one of those concepts. This just was the show. They just did the show and realized that, you know what, that is enough. I love that they trusted the material enough to just do Pippin in all of its oddity, in all of its strangeness, in all of its flamboyance and exuberance, without feeling like they had to put this big concept onto it that may or may not work. This concert was directed by Jonathan Boyle, and in terms of the amount of staging, this is exactly what I want from a semi-staged concert, because we had the full orchestra on stage, the brilliant and always glorious sounding London Musical Theatre Orchestra, and if you're doing something in concert, I think it's about the material. I think it's about the score and how that sounds, and I want to be able to see the orchestra, who you never get to see, or you don't often get to see in musicals. We have seen concerts that aren't nearly produced enough. I think we've also seen concerts that are overproduced and hide the orchestra away and do too much. Now, those are brilliant performances, but they're not strictly speaking concerts. They're kind of just preview presentations of West End shows to be. This, which had costuming and had choreography and people weren't holding scripts, but also didn't really have much of a set because it didn't really need one, worked on multiple levels because it was perfect as a concert, but it also meant that they didn't need to ask difficult questions about what this version of Pippin was going to look like. They just did the material. And honestly, what great material it is. I'm going to talk about Schwartz's score for a second here, because even as an admitted lover of this show, you forget how many great songs there are. Like, none of us are ever going to forget Corner of the Sky, but Morning Glow, and specifically the ensemble vocal lines in Morning Glow and those vocal arrangements, my goodness. I'd forgotten how great parts of the score like Glory were. What a song. And even I, who was pretty sick of hearing Corner of the Sky as well as singing Corner of the Sky, just loved so much that reprise of it towards the end, where you got the Arts Ed choir in the background, these 50 voices giving you robust depth to the epic reprise that is "Rivers belong where they can ramble." It was so good. It was epic, it was stirring, it was huge. It's everything you want a Drury Lane concert version of this show to be, because this is a show that, for the most part, has only been produced in smaller London venues for the last, like, 20 years. Drury Lane is massive and demands this kind of scale. And they filled it. To their credit, they managed to fill it. It also looked and sounded fantastic in terms of the sound and lighting design, particularly the sound. Shout out to you, Adam Fisher. Not that the lighting wasn't great, but the sound is the one that we have had issues with in some of these recent concerts. And I know for a fact that people are a little bit reluctant to book tickets to some of these because they have concert fatigue, but also because with a lot of concert producers, not these ones, there is no guarantee you're actually going to be able to hear the thing because the sound has sadly been inadequate. And there is a larger conversation we can have about there being too many concert versions of shows, but when they're done well, like this, it's thrilling. Oh, do you know what else was great? Joanna Goodwin's choreography. There was so much dance in this. The ensemble was small but mighty, I think. In particular, and I will talk about performances later, but Amanik Malako blowing everyone out of the water with his execution of this Fosse-inspired but original choreography. He is such a mesmerizing dancer, always an ensemble standout in whatever show he's in. While I'm on this topic, I do have one little weird note about the way the ensemble was utilized. Of course, in an ideal world, you would want the players to be a larger group, and I do long for the version where, you know, the characters like Charlemagne and Fastrada go back into the ensemble when they're done playing their roles, or that starts to happen more increasingly throughout the thing, teasing what's to come at the end before they reappear right at the finale as players encouraging Pippin to jump into the fire or whatnot. But the lore of the thing is very important to me, and you know I'm specific like this. There is a line towards the beginning of the show when Charlemagne is holding court and one of the players is portraying a peasant, and Charlemagne orders that they be taken away and hanged for some sort of an insolent comment or for daring to ask for too much. And then there's a parallel when Pippin becomes king and, you know, becomes enraged despite his better judgment and orders the same thing. And the player says, "Not again." And the beauty of it is that it's the same player within the ensemble portraying either the same peasant or portraying a different peasant, however you want to choose your own adventure there. But it's the same player saying, "Oh no, I've been hanged again," and that's the joke. And they had this be two different people. I'm like, you've only got 4 players. What are the chances it ended up being 2 different people? Like, if you don't appreciate that that is where the humor comes from, that it's the same player who does both of those moments, then you were unlucky not to stumble onto it anyway by just giving them to the same person. Anyway, that's a very small detail with what I thought was generally a fantastic evening. The second act of the show changes gears significantly. I don't know if this is to everyone's taste. I really like it because we start to see the nefarious side of the leading player who has been super likable and charismatic up to this point, and I guess whose personality has benefited from the contrast with the deeply self-involved and malicious Fastrada, the manipulative wife of Charlemagne, and Charlemagne himself, the ruthless king. But by the time that Catherine arrives, she is very down-to-earth, she is super endearing, and she is the first player within the troupe who does not have the firmest grasp on her role, and it's through that that we start to see the cracks in the entire facade. The leading player becomes impatient with her, and the leading player themselves then gets characterized with a little bit more malice, and this is where it gets interesting. It's also initially a source of comedy because the leading player makes jokes about Catherine being too old to play this role and is sassy and is like, you're supposed to do the line like this, and then she repeats it. But this is the first time we start to see things going wrong. It builds towards a darker conclusion. It builds towards Catherine going off script with I Guess I'll Miss the Man, which is a beautiful moment in the show. It delivers such honesty, and then you get this whole final finale section with this hugely powerful piece of music, and then it all strips away for Pippin's final thoughts on all of this and the leading player's subsequent rage, during which time they, the leading player who has historically been played by performers of any and all genders, order that everything be taken away. Have the lights turned off, they actually address the orchestra and they say put down your instruments, and they say take your damn hands off the keyboard to the pianist. The music stops, the lights go out, everything becomes a lot more real. And this is one of my favourite capabilities of the show. It situates the audience as the actual audience to this performance that they are giving. It's sort of pseudo-immersive. Before that was a concept, and I think the further that they can go with this device, the more they can take away, the better that it is. And I think this could really be pushed, more so perhaps even than any of the productions I've ever seen in my life. Perhaps someone can tell me about an exciting way that this has been experienced before, but I think it's a really, really cool moment. In this version of the show, because it was a concert, like, they altered the lighting and they had the orchestra stop playing, and you have the benefit of seeing the orchestra on stage, so the leading player can address them directly and go over to the pianist and threaten them, basically. But there wasn't that much to take out, there wasn't that much set in the first place to strip everything back, and so we couldn't really do that moment to its fullest. But I'm really searching for like lentils of criticism among the ashes of the brilliance of this show, so let me tell you now about the standout performances and the highlight moments of the evening. So I want to begin with the two cast members who I thought really stole the show, Patricia Hodge and Zizi Stralin. Each of them got these fantastic numbers in the first act. Patricia got to deliver the song No Time at All. Her casting in this concert was really special because she originated the role of Catherine during the show's first West End run decades ago, and was now playing the role of Bertha, Pippin's grandmother. She has some lovely naughty dialogue. She gets to lead Pippin and the audience in a sing-along of No Time at All, obviously because I'm obnoxious, I was really trying to put that harmony in there. Turn to fall. You gotta hear, you gotta get the crunch at the fall. It's important. But she, with almost no staging, just walking around very comfortable on this enormous stage in this enormous auditorium, connecting with every single person in the audience with just her natural warmth and charisma and stage presence, managed to deliver one of the most show-stopping moments of the evening. She got such a huge round of applause after being carried off Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend style into the wings that Jack Yarrow gestured for her to come back on and take a second ovation, which is something we never really see happen. And it was also a salute to her entire stage career, but effortlessly she was wonderful in this role. Then you have Zizi Stralin as Fastrada, who managed to make her performance look effortless, but my god what she was doing on this stage. I have for some time now begun to suspect that Zizi Stralin is one of the most talented human beings on the planet. She is best known for having recently played the role of Mary Poppins in the West End, but she has been going from show to show, giving you various different turns. What they almost all have in common is her very exciting vocal placement and her fantastic dance ability. Let me explain more about both. Now, if you don't know, performing arts talent runs in the family. Not only is Zizi the younger sister of Summer and Scarlett Stralin, but her parents are also performers, and her aunt is Bonnie Langford. And more every time I see her, Zizi is reminding me more and more of Bonnie. She has that brassy old school tone to her voice. When she was singing the role of Mary Poppins, which her sister Scarlett had played before her, you know, it's meant to be this soprano role, and there are so few notes of that score that she actually delivered in head voice because she has this crazy mix that goes so high and is thrilling to listen to. But she is also a dancer, like she does Matthew Bourne dance shows as well as legit musical theatre. And she's a brilliant bawdy comedian who you can tell has fun with these kind of roles. So her as Fastrada was just perfect. It was giving golden age Broadway Fosse dancing leading lady. It was also giving like Studio 54 1970s gay icon. She was fantastic. She had this brilliant outfit. She had a little tearaway skirt. She is throwing herself around the stage. She is kicking over her head. She's landing every single comedy line. They actually took out some of the dialogue from her number. I'm like, put it all back in. Give Zizi more. In particular, there's one joke that she delivers to the audience where she acknowledges that there is likely to be a conspiracy to kill her husband and she should definitely warn him. And then he very easily leaves immediately afterwards and she doesn't, and then she says, oh dear, in the hustle and bustle of my lord's departure, I completely forgot to warn him. And there's a lot of fun moments like that they cut from this, which made me sad, but we did get a thrilling vocal option. Now this, mind-blowing, because it comes after she's done this huge dance break. She's dancing flat out with all of the ensemble, and then they all sing her melody, and they sing, and if we all could, and then she, perhaps breathily or whatever, delivers, spread a little sunshine. And at this moment, in the section of the song that has been crafted specifically so she doesn't have to sing, so she can get her breath back after just doing that crazy dance number, this is where the woman puts in a vocal option up and goes, spread a little sunshine. It was insane. I was not prepared for it. I may have shrieked. Apologies if you were sat in front of me at Drury Lane. But there is honestly nothing I won't go and see this woman do. She is going to be in another concert staging later this year. She's going to be playing Laurie in Oklahoma. She will be giving you legit vocals, and I assume she will also be dancing her own dream ballet. Do yourself a favor, get tickets. It's going to be fantastic just for Zizi. But they were not the only people on stage in this production, and there were some really fantastic performances as well. Cedric Neal played Charlemagne in a very different way to how I've seen Charlemagne portrayed before, because it's normally more like classical Shakespearean, and he was giving you something more contemporary with, of course, beautiful, fluid Cedric Neal vocal riffing moments in War is a Science. Never how I expected to hear that song, but because he's Cedric Neal, he can justify it and make it sound great. He also had one or two great comedy moments of his own. He has a lot of charm to him, does Cedric Neal. Of course, one of the biggest draws for many people would have been Alex Newell, who was playing the MC, who recently became a Tony Award winner for their performance in the musical Shucked. They may be independently owned, but they are now internationally beloved. And having had the experience of getting to meet Alex a couple of times in a late night cocktail bar setting in Manhattan, this was very quintessential Alex Newell performance. The vocals were insane, the riffs were plentiful. There is one iconic riff moment within the show that I feel like Bettina Miller made iconic in the song On the Right Track. And if Bettina did that to a 10, Alex was giving you like a 37. There were so many notes. And for a concert production of the show, I did feel like it was a pretty perfect leading player performance. The one dimension we didn't get was the darkness at the end and the malice. Like, Alex was sassy but never got all the way to threatening. And I think for almost everyone on that stage, there was a level of depth in the final moments of those shows that we didn't really investigate and we didn't really reach, and I think it's just because of the nature of the performance. I did thoroughly enjoy Alex watching the players performing the iconic Manson Trio choreography and sort of half-heartedly imitating it from the side, like, that looks fun, let me try a little bit of that, but in a very sort of a small way. I also loved the subtle characterization of some of the leading players' lines. There's a great joke where another player comes out with a burning torch, nodding to the end of the show, and keeps saying, now, and the leading player's response to that is always, not now, later. Alex Newell's version is, oh honey, not now, later. And that's subtle, but I liked it. But the vocals, the best leading player vocals I have ever heard in person, and the sass and the comic delivery, so good. Then we have Jack Yarrow, who was playing Pippin, which I think is a deceptively challenging role, because you're balancing trying to be endearing and trying to be this central protagonist, but at the same time, he's not the most likable. The choices he's making are very self-involved, especially when we get into that second act. You know, Catherine is bending over backwards trying to make him feel better and trying to comfort him, and it takes a little bit of time for him to be redeemed, I think, in the eyes of the audience. We do see him being selfish for most of the show. In terms of Jack Yarrow's interpretation of this, it was giving the second act of Joseph when he's showing off to his brothers who haven't realized who he is. It was very that. And I think he leaned into the egotism of the character really quite well, but there is something prevailingly endearing and charismatic about him that allowed us to still connect to the character. Now, vocally, he had a lot of people he had to square up to on that stage. Lucy Jones and Cedric Neal and Zizi and Alex Newell. And Jack Yarrow, I think, has a stunning voice. When I saw him in Joseph, I was like, evidently there are much more exciting things his voice could be doing. I think I said that in my review. I was like, get him in Les Mis, giving us empty chairs. He is wasted on this role. Then when I saw him in Old Friends, I was like, oh, this is exactly what his voice should be doing. Him singing Tony in the West Side Story section, that sounded gorgeous. And then seeing him in this, which is just that little bit more contemporary, I'm not sure if it tonally really worked for me. Like, he still sounded great and he still had all of the requisite power and the range, but there are little floaty bits within the score, like in the song With You when he's singing, but all my days were twice as fair if I could share my days with you. There were a couple of those moments where tonally I didn't necessarily feel like his instrument was the perfect fit for this score. I do want to quickly mention Idris Kagbo, who made the spectacular choice of playing Lewis as incredibly camp, and Ryan Heehan, who was also very funny as Theo, and my goodness, the key that the little Corner of the Sky reprise he sings at the end was in, I was like, wow, if we're starting here, this is going up. But we also have to talk about Lucy Jones, who dominates much of the second act as Catherine. Obviously, she sounded great. There are few people who can belt with that kind of a clarity like Lucy Jones has when she gets onto that perfect belt note. And there was a moment in the song, I Guess I'll Miss the Man, where I fully saw this coming. It was on the word abrasive right towards the end of the song. It was like a couple of seconds before I was like, oh, we're going to get a Lucy Jones belt moment. And we did, and it sounded great. It's one of those notes that has so much weight and depth to it that it echoes off of the walls of the theatre and you feel surrounded by it. She is also, though she has this leading lady voice, really well suited to these quirky comedy roles. It's what made her Jenna in Waitress so great. It's the same thing I enjoyed about her recently leading a workshop performance of 13 Going on 30, the musical, but she again was really great casting in this show for the role of Catherine. And I could talk more dramaturgically about this approach to the show and like the connectivity between all of these characters, but at the end of the day, this was a concert presentation. And though we have so many of these concerts happening right now, it doesn't take a lot to get them right. You just need great performances on stage, you just need to trust the material and understand the material creatively, and we need to be able to see and hear it. That's really all that we need. And this delivered on all of those fronts. I am so excited that we got to see this. Hopefully, this could give way to another major revival of Pippin. I would love to see Pippin staged again in a version that is just, you know, more simple. We don't need to have a high concept over the top. I think the material works, and the right creative team who just trust this material can understand that. In any case, this was a delicious production that has made me hungry for a fully staged one. Somebody bring back Pippin, let me come and see it. For now though, those have been my thoughts about the concert production at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and if you got to see this as well, comment down below with what you thought. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications wherever they may be so you don't miss any of my upcoming West End and Broadway reviews. And I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!